The wind bent the grass low across the Wyoming plains, whispering like a mother might to a child too long unsheltered. Dust hung in the air like old memories, soft and relentless, refusing to settle. A lone figure rode across the horizon, cloaked in leather and silence, framed by the last yellow rays of a sun that knew how to disappear without apology. Wade Callahan kept his eyes low beneath the brim of his hat, every motion deliberate. He wasn't in a hurry, but every mile was another he didn't want to ride. His horse, an aging bay with one white sock and a scar across its flank, moved with the same quiet endurance. Tied behind the saddle was a small tin pail and an oilskin-wrapped parcel. His rifle lay across the saddle horn, untouched but present, like the ghosts that rode with him. At the edge of the prairie, a small homestead broke the landscape. Smoke curled from the chimney in a fragile thread. Wade dismounted, boots sinking into the muddy ground. He didn't knock right away. He just stood there, hat in hand, listening, not for dogs, not for footsteps, but for anything that would tell him to turn away. Then he raised a knuckle and tapped. Inside, Eleanor Price froze mid-step, her hand halfway to the stove. She wasn't expecting anyone. She rarely did. Her world had narrowed to the small, stove-warmed room and the field beyond, where nothing grew but weeds and regrets. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped toward the door, spine straight, eyes narrowed. When she opened it, she saw a man who had been both starved and fed by the land. "Ma'am," Wade said, voice low, even. "I don't mean trouble." Eleanor said nothing. "I've got 2 boys. Ain't had a proper meal in 3 days. I can pay. Not much, but something." The wind tugged at her sleeves, then passed through the space between them like an unseen judge. She looked past him. No wagon, no wife, no smile. "Why not your own cooking?" she asked, arms folded. "I try. They won't eat it." She considered his face. Not desperate, not begging, just tired, worn by something deeper than miles. Maybe that was why she said yes. "Leave your horse out by the fence. Don't want him spooking my hens." He nodded once. "Thank you." She shut the door, not entirely gently. The ride back to his place was quiet. Eleanor rode a mule, slower than his horse, but steady. She didn't ask questions. He didn't offer explanations. The woods grew thick on the west side of the trail, whispering again. Above, the sky bruised with the first hints of dusk. When they reached the Callahan house, she saw the fields first. Untouched, overgrown, fences broken in 2 or 3 places. Then the house, plain, 2-roomed, leaning slightly to the left as if it, too, had grown weary of standing. Inside, the air was still. Eleanor stepped in and paused. The smell wasn't foul, just empty. No warmth, no oil, no bread, no comfort. She saw the boys first. One sat by the window, maybe 9 or 10, watching the wind move the curtain like he feared it might grab him. The other, younger, sat cross-legged on the floor with a carved wooden horse clutched to his chest. Neither of them looked up. "This is Luke," Wade said, nodding toward the elder, "and Silas." "They don't talk much?" she asked. "They used to." She set her things down and walked toward the stove. There were pans, but no kindling. She opened the firebox. Cold ash. She sighed and walked back out. He followed her to the woodshed. "You got a wife buried?" she asked bluntly as he chopped. "Yes," he said. "Name was Nora." "What happened?" "Fever took her while I was away." "War?" He nodded. "Came back to find her wrapped in a quilt and the preacher waiting. She didn't say she was sorry. She just stacked the wood. Back inside she worked. It like she had always belonged there. The boys never spoke, but watched. Eleanor noticed how Luke flinched when the pot scraped, how Silas sucked his thumb when she bent near. There were no toys, no laughter, no music, only the tick of an old clock and the creak of the wind. As she stirred the pot, beans, lard, and wild onions, she saw Wade watching her, but not in the way men sometimes did. His gaze was fixed not on her hands or her figure, but on the motion of something familiar, something lost. "You don't have to stay long," he said. "I didn't plan to." The food simmered. She found plates, chipped but clean enough. She served them. The boys didn't move at first, like they weren't sure it was real. Wade gave a nod and they crept toward the table. Luke took a bite, chewed slow, and then another. Silas just held his spoon like it was a question. When they were done, Eleanor washed the dishes. Wade stood by the door like a soldier guarding an empty fort. She finished drying the last plate when Silas suddenly stood and walked toward her. He held up the wooden horse. "His legs broke," he said quietly. Eleanor blinked. It was the first voice since she'd arrived. She knelt. "Let me see." He handed it over like a treasure, and she examined the snapped leg. "I can fix it, if you've got glue." Wade moved to the shelf and returned with a small bottle. Eleanor glued the leg and wrapped it in thread. "There," she said, handing it back. "Give it a day." Silas looked up at her with wide eyes, then nodded solemnly. Luke watched from the corner, not moving. "You fixed more than just the toy," Wade said later, as he walked her to her mule. "I didn't come here to fix anything. I know." The wind picked up, rustling the trees in a soft, bone-deep sigh. Wade glanced toward the barn. "You should ride out before dark." She mounted, then hesitated. "You've got a trap out back." "Saw it. For the foxes." "Or something else?" He didn't answer. She didn't press. Back at her cabin, Eleanor lit the lantern and stared at the flames longer than necessary. He'd cooked for strangers before. But something in Wade's eyes, the way he said they used to talk, curled under her skin. The next day, just after midday, she returned. "You left your towel," she said, holding out a cloth that didn't belong to anyone. Wade met her at the gate. He looked surprised, but not displeased. "I made more stew," she added. That night, as the wind howled and snow began to threaten the horizon, Eleanor sat by the fire in Wade's cabin while the boys slept. She watched him take out a box from beneath the floorboards. He opened it slowly. Inside was a faded letter, still sealed. "You never read it." He shook his head. "Why?" "Because it came after." Silence stretched between them like distance. "She wrote it before she got sick," he said. "Gave it to the neighbor in case I didn't come back soon enough." Eleanor reached across the table and touched the paper, but didn't open it. "It'll wait," she said. He nodded, folded it again, placed it back. "I ain't asked your story," he said. "You haven't," she replied. They didn't speak for a while after that. She left before dawn. Snow had begun to fall, soft and uncertain. As she rode, the cold bit into her shawl, but something warm stayed curled in her chest. She hadn't come back because she forgot her towel. The next morning, she found Silas waiting near the edge of her fence. He wasn't alone. Luke stood behind him, holding a jar of jam and a note in Wade's steady hand. "Thank you," it read, "for feeding more than hunger." She didn't smile, but she didn't cry either. Instead, she reached for her coat. The air had changed. Eleanor noticed it as she walked the same trail she'd taken days before, a basket swinging from her arm and her eyes sharp beneath the brim of her bonnet. The woods that bordered the trail were darker now, not from shadow, but from silence. Even the birds seemed to speak less. Snow dusted the low brush like sugar on bitter bread, and the earth beneath her boots was brittle with frost. She hadn't told herself she was coming back. She simply woke early, tied her apron tighter, and filled the basket with what she had, half a loaf, a wedge of cheese, and dried soup herbs. Nothing more, nothing less. But beneath the bread, tucked in wax paper, was a small ribbon she found in the back of her drawer. Pink. Faded. It had belonged to no one she could remember. When she reached the Callahan homestead, she paused. The boys were outside, quiet as ever, Luke splitting firewood while Silas drew crooked circles in the frost. They looked up and didn't smile, but they didn't flinch either. That was something. Wade emerged from the barn, sleeves rolled up, an axe in one hand, and a puzzled look across his face. His beard had grown a little, his eyes too, somehow softer. "You come all this way for silence?" he asked. "I brought food." He took the basket with slow hands, like it might vanish. "Stay for supper," he said after a pause. "I suppose I could," she answered, though she already had her coat unbuttoned. Inside, the fire was lit. Not warm exactly, but trying. Eleanor hung her shawl and set to work, brushing flour from the table and inspecting the larder. It was better stocked than before. Barely. A sack of beans, dried apples, salt pork that smelled a day too old. "You've been trying," she said. "I have," Wade replied. "But they don't eat unless it smells like something they remember. Then we make new memories." That evening, Luke helped slice the apples. He said nothing, but didn't pull away when Eleanor guided his hands. Silas watched, his small shoulders twitching when the knife clicked against the board. The stew simmered, and slowly the room filled with something rare. Hope made scent. After the meal, they didn't talk. Not out of tension, but peace. Eleanor sat in the rocker near the fire, stitching the lining of her sleeve. Wade sat nearby, whittling a piece of driftwood into what might become a bird. The boys drew pictures in the ash on the hearthstone. No one asked what the others were thinking. Later, when the fire had burned low, Wade stepped outside with her, both wrapped against the wind. "There's been tracks," he said. "Fox or wolf. Might be looking for chickens." "You have chickens?" "Had," he corrected. "2 gone already." "I can help mend the coop." He looked at her, not suspicious, just unsure. "You know your way around wood and nails?" "I know enough to stop hungry things from getting in." The next morning she returned. They worked side by side beneath a sky the color of pewter. The boards on the coop were split and half frozen. She held the hammer. He cut the slats. She missed once, hit her thumb, cursed under her breath. Wade almost laughed. They didn't speak much, but something grew in the quiet between words. Trust, perhaps, or at least something like recognition. When the last nail was set, she looked up at the tree line and paused. "You ever feel watched?" Wade followed her gaze. The trees held nothing but wind, but still, something prickled. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I fought in the war, learned to listen. Learned to fear?" "No," he said. "Learned what to respect." They didn't speak of it again, but from that moment, Eleanor walked with one hand near her pocket knife. As winter deepened, she came more often. Not daily, but close. The boys began to expect her, Silas howed her a feather he found. Luke once pointed to a drawing he made, a cabin with 4 stick figures. She fixed the torn curtains, seamed old socks, found a rocking horse in the barn and cleaned it, then left it by the hearth without a word. When she returned, Silas was sitting on it, swaying gently, eyes wide like he feared he'd wake up. Wade came in one evening and found Eleanor alone, humming. It wasn't a tune he knew, but he liked the way her voice dipped and rose like the hills out past the bluff. "Where'd you learn that?" "My mother used to sing it when she missed home." "Where was home?" She stirred the pot. "Somewhere we never got to." He leaned against the wall, watching her in the low light. "You never talk about your husband." "Neither do you," she said. "Fair enough." Later, when the boys were asleep and the fire cracking slow, Wade sat at the table, turning the sealed letter between his fingers. "I almost opened it," he said. "What stopped you?" "Was afraid it'd end things. Maybe it starts something." He said nothing, but didn't put the letter away either. The next day brought snow, real snow. Thick, sound swallowing, and white as regret. Eleanor stayed longer than planned. Wade insisted she remain until morning. She didn't argue. The house was quiet, the way a church is quiet when it's empty but still full of prayers. That night, she and Wade sat near the window. Snow brushed the panes, and the boys slept close together in their shared bed. "I buried a child once," she said suddenly, as if it had been waiting. Wade didn't look at her, just waited. Before the mine collapsed, before any of it. A girl, barely a year. Fever, like your Nora. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of mourning. "I think that's why I stayed away so long," she continued. "From people, from sound. Grief is loud, but it echoes longer in silence. He said nothing. He didn't have to. In the morning, they found animal prints in the snow, bigger than fox. Could have been a wolf or something hungrier. Wade checked the traps. Empty. When Eleanor turned to leave, Wade touched her wrist. "You don't have to come back if you don't want to." She searched his face. "But you want me to." "I do." She left without answering. 2 days passed. Snow kept falling. The world went white. Then one morning the sky cleared like a held breath released. Sunlight made everything look softer, even the scars on the land. Eleanor returned, not with stew, but with books. 2 children's readers, and a Bible with a cracked spine. Luke took the first book without a word. Silas clutched the second, like it might run from him. "They need more than food," she said. "I know. They need stories. You'll give them?" "If I can." That evening, a shadow passed along the tree line. Wade saw it from the porch. Tall, 2-legged, too far to make out a face. He gripped the rifle. "Bandits?" "Could be," he muttered. "I thought they stayed east." "They go where the food is, where the smoke rises." She didn't ask what he would do. She just placed her hand over the rifle's barrel and lowered it gently. "They haven't come close yet." "Yet," he echoed. Later that night there was a knock. Not at the door, but a sharp rap on the side wall. Wade grabbed the rifle, opened the door fast. Nothing. Just tracks. Human, barely visible in the snow. Wade followed them to the edge of the trees and stopped. A man stepped out, hands raised. He was tall, wrapped in furs, and lean as a fence post. His face was marked with old scars and old eyes. "Didn't mean to spook you," the stranger said. "Saw the smoke." Wade didn't lower the rifle. "What do you want?" "Shelter. A place to sleep before I keep on. Got no interest in your livestock or your silver if you've got any." Wade studied him. "I know you." The man nodded. "Used to ride under Captain Ellis, Fort McKinley." Wade lowered the rifle. "Ronan, them, ought I'd be forgotten." "Not likely," Wade said. He turned to Eleanor. "He saved my life once." She didn't ask how. She just stepped aside. Ronan stayed for one night. He spoke little but observed much. He watched the boys, the fire, Eleanor. Said nothing when Silas fell asleep curled against Eleanor's side, just nodded like he approved. Before he left, he whispered to Wade by the door. "You've got eyes on you." "I know. Bandits, 2, maybe 3, following the creek trail, hungry and mean." "How long?" "A day, maybe less." Wade looked toward the cabin. "You still shoot straight?" Ronan asked. "When I have to." Ronan vanished into the woods like smoke. That evening, Wade cleaned the rifle slowly, deliberately. Eleanor watched, sitting beside the hearth. "Will you run?" she asked. "No." "Will you fight?" "If I must." "And the boys?" "They'll stay hidden." She nodded. Then she reached across the table and placed the pink ribbon she'd once tucked away into Wade's hand. For luck. For memory. Outside, the snow fell again, lightly, gently, covering all footprints, all warnings. Inside, 4 hearts beat slow and steady. Waiting. Dawn broke cold and glass-clear, casting hard shadows across the snow. The frost crackled beneath Wade's boots as he stepped onto the porch, rifle slung low, eyes sweeping the distant tree line. Nothing moved. Yet. The quiet wasn't peaceful. It pressed against his ears like water, thick and muffled, as if the land were holding its breath. He didn't speak. He just watched. Inside, the fire burned steady. Eleanor moved through the house with practiced calm, laying out bread, pouring water into the kettle, stirring the coals. The boys slept together on the far side of the room, Luke's arm wrapped protectively over Silas, like a barrier against whatever storm waited outside. The rocking horse sat beside them, silent witness to dreams neither of them voiced. Wade stepped back in without a word, and Eleanor looked up, sensing the weight he carried before he could say it. "They're close," he said. How close? Half a mile. They've circled twice. She nodded, then crossed to the cupboard. Without being told, she began gathering food into a satchel. Dried apples, a cloth-wrapped piece of cheese, 2 biscuits from yesterday's meal. She tucked the pink ribbon into the pocket of her apron, where her fingers found it without looking. "You want me to take the boys out the back?" she asked. "There's a hollow near the creek bed," Wade replied. "Brush thick enough to hide them." "They'll be scared." He looked toward them. "They already are." A long silence passed between them. No fear, just the certainty of a coming moment. "I'll stay," Eleanor said. Wade didn't argue. They woke the boys gently, quietly, with no drama or fear in their voices. Luke, old enough to understand, held Silas close as they wrapped up in heavy coats and followed Eleanor through the back door and into the trees. The snow was deep, but Eleanor knew how to move without leaving more than a trace. She didn't look back. Wade stood alone now. The first figure emerged from the east, a smear of shadow against the brightness. Another appeared behind him, leaner, face half covered in a ragged scarf. Wade stepped forward from the house, rifle raised but not yet aimed. "Keep walking," he called. "There's nothing here worth dying over." The first man, taller and broad-shouldered beneath a threadbare coat, lifted his hand in mock surrender. "Don't want much," he said. "Just a place to warm up, bit of food. Then knock on a church." "We saw the smoke days ago," the second man added. "Knew someone had to be here, didn't think we'd get such a warm welcome." "You ain't welcome," Wade said flatly. There was a pause, and in it the silence shifted. The wind stopped moving. The birds had already gone. "All right," the first man said, drawing his coat back. Wade fired before the revolver cleared. The man's hip. The shot echoed across the land like a whip crack. The second man ducked, shouted something Wade didn't catch, and scrambled toward the barn. Wade moved left, fast and low, boots crunching snow, loading another shell into the chamber. Gunfire rang out. Splinters flew from the porch beam where Wade had been seconds before. He fired again. Missed. The second man took cover behind the well, returning fire in erratic bursts. Inside the trees, Eleanor crouched with the boys between her arms. Silas whimpered, Luke trembling but silent. She whispered to them, not comfort, but instruction. "Stay low. Don't move unless I say. Eyes on me." More shots. Then silence. Then the sudden sound of a scuffle, grunts, wood cracking. Eleanor strained to hear. A final shot broke the moment, then nothing but the caw of a startled raven overhead. She waited, heart hammering. Wade called her name. She ran. He was kneeling beside the barn. Blood soaked his sleeve. Beside him lay the second man, motionless. The first bandit was slumped just beyond the fence, eyes open and glassy. "You're hit," she said. "Grazed." She tore a piece from her apron and pressed it to the wound. "Boys?" "Safe." He nodded. Let the pain come through his breath, but not his voice. Behind them, the fire from a lantern must have caught. Smoke rolled from the barn in thick black sheets. Wade turned to look, jaw tight. "I built that with Nora." "Then we'll build something else," she said. They buried the bodies behind the bluff. Eleanor didn't ask where Wade learned to dig a grave that fast or that neatly. Some things didn't need retelling. The boys helped in silence, handing stones, smoothing dirt. When it was done, no one spoke of them again. The days that followed were quiet. Wade moved slower, arm in a sling, but still stubbornly tending the chickens, the firewood, the fence. Eleanor began teaching Luke letters from the reader. Silas followed her like a shadow, showing her every rock he found, every feather, every worm in the garden soil. The snow didn't let up, but the cold felt different now, sharper perhaps, but less lonely. One evening Wade sat on the porch, carving again. The driftwood bird now had wings. Eleanor joined him, knitting something small and green. She didn't say what it was. He didn't ask. I used to think silence meant something was missing, she said, that it meant absence, pain. And now it feels like rest. He turned the carving over in his hands. I almost opened it. She looked at him. The letter. You want to read it now? He didn't answer, just went inside, retrieved the envelope, yellowed and soft at the edges. Eleanor unfolded it with care. The ink had faded, but the words remained. My dearest Wade, if you're reading this, then I didn't get to hold you one last time. But I know you came back. I know you always would. Please don't let the boys grow up in silence. Tell them stories, let them run, let them laugh, teach them to live. And you, Wade, don't lock the door to your heart. I want you to find someone who will sit with you by the fire, even when the world grows quiet. Love always, Nora. Eleanor read it aloud, her voice breaking once, then steadying. When she finished, she folded the letter and set it in Wade's palm. She wanted you to keep living, Eleanor said. I didn't know how. You're learning. He looked at her, and in the firelight, she didn't look like a stranger anymore. They burned the letter, not from anger, not to forget, but to let it go. The ashes rose into the wind, dancing above the chimney smoke before disappearing into the night. Luke asked the next morning if Eleanor was staying for breakfast. She looked to Wade, then nodded. I think I will. Weeks passed. The boys began to speak more, play more. Laughter, tentative and small at first, began to fill corners of the house that hadn't known sound in months. Wade built a new barn, with Eleanor at his side, her hands calloused from work and warmth. Sometimes they sat in silence still, but it was the comfortable kind, shared, lived in. The fire crackled, the boys played near the hearth, and outside, the snow softened under the sun's return. Spring didn't come suddenly. It crept in, slow and cautious, like everything that had ever lasted. One morning, Wade handed Eleanor a worn wooden box. She opened it to find the driftwood bird, sanded smooth, its wings outstretched. For your shelf, he said. She smiled. I don't have one. Then we'll build it. And they did. Together. The fire, once just survival, now settled deep into the bones of the house. It warmed the silence, filled it, made it theirs. In a world where grief speaks louder than words, sometimes healing begins with a knock at the door, a quiet meal, and the courage to stay. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell us in the comments, what would you do if love found you again in the quiet places? New stories every week. Stay warm, stay kind, and keep the fire burning.